chance to chat about what she's been up to.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Right, I was paired with Damon, so unfortunately Damon obviously has left, so I've got a buddy to work with at the minute, but it was really useful even in the first term because my focus has been about engaging the least able. I teach a lot of A-level and top sets, and when I suddenly get a set 4 or 5, I always find it really, really hard work. So we got as far as I did meet with Damon, and we just sat down and discussed his strategies for dealing. Obviously he has a huge amount of experience with the least able and engaging them and keeping them engaged. And what I found really refreshing was the crossover between us really, and that a lot of the things he said I thought, yeah, I do that, I do that, I do that. But he did give me some strategies that I don't do, so that was particularly useful. He made me realise that, you know, of those kids that are in your class that don't engage, there are 2 types. There are the I can't engage and the I won't engage. And it's recognising the difference between them. Really made me stop and think and go back to my class and say, yeah, you're one that can't and you're one that won't. And he also made me realise that it is okay to sit down next to them if you get time and do the whole starting them off on something. That's what he says he does with a lot of the I won't students, was to sit down and say, actually start the writing for them and just get them going. And I have found that does work. And it does maintain it for a little bit, not long enough, but it does get them at least started with those really reluctant writers. What else did I get from him? The other thing I've done, with not having a partner now, I can obviously observe him, but I've gone to observe Jo Young, who teaches a lot of the least able students in that sort and works with the least able, and just see what strategies I could get from her. And I think the thing I took most from watching her was how lively she is and how she keeps them buzzy, because she is so buzzy. And I'm not that kind of person. I'm trying to be a bit more buzzy, but she's just so active herself, and she's so geeing them on all the time. And I know I don't do that, so I need to start doing that a bit more. She, you know, with that assessment for learning on mini whiteboards, she was very, the language that she used was very different to the language that I use. She would just go, yes, 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 no, yes, yes, yes. And I tend to go, yep, that's right, that's right. Have a look again at that one. It obviously takes a lot longer the way I was doing it, so I thought, yeah, I'd adopt that in future, even though it was a bit harsh, the no. It worked, you know, it didn't put them off because it was so quick and it moved on quickly. It did work with it. And the other thing I got from observing her was her seating plan. I always worry about my set in there, the naughties I put on the outside, and they are prime target for, you know, when we get visitors to come in and sit alongside them. And I noticed hers were in the middle. She had really nice, quiet, hard-working people on the outside, and her naughties were more in the middle. So I might try that. That will be my next change, I think. So
does she put naughties with naughties?
There were 2 naughties together, yes, but not always. There were others with nice, quiet ones, and it does depend on the chemistry of your class and how many naughties you've got, doesn't it? But I thought they were the sort of 2 things that I would take away, was this yes-no assessment for learning that was very quick and sharp and worked really effectively, and having a look again at my season plan. That's it, Jane.
Cool. Denise, did you want to say about what you think?
Yeah, I've been in to observe Ben with his year 10s.
Ben
Hedler. I think some of them are quite tricky. I don't know who they are, but it was, as you can imagine, it was absolutely quiet, really well behaved in there. They were really responsive as well. So it's really good to see in terms of cross-curricular how a different subject works, and how actually there are some similarities as well, because although the topic is different, actually the skills that you're using as teachers across the curriculum are very, very similar. So that was really interesting. We had a chat about them afterwards, about the lesson afterwards, and he was explaining how some of them are really quite tricky across the school. But they were really engaged in the topic and doing some really challenging work, which I was looking at and I was thinking, I'm not sure that I know what to do there. But they were just really, really engaged, and they worked well as a group as well. It was quite a small group, I think some of them were out that day. But even so, it was just lovely to go in and watch and observe. So that's as far as we've got.
So I'm sort of going to pick up a little bit on what Denise said, but also on what Lee Riddell did last week. I know some of you were here, because I know one of the things he was saying was that it's quite difficult, isn't it, when you've got a different thing that you're both working on to sort of work on that together. So I sort of went away and thought a little bit about that. Yeah, it is tricky, but I also thought that actually maybe the other thing we can do when we meet is not just focus solely on our target, but try and pick up other things from each other in other subjects. So I found it easier to write some things down, so I really hope that's all right. It comes out. I think I photocopied enough, because now we're paying, so obviously for our photocopying, I was quite careful. So, you want one? So I just tried to make some notes on some of the things I thought. I know we've all got our focus. That's the first thing I said. I know we're all working on something in particular in our trios, but I just think it is really good to meet with someone outside of your curriculum area, because I think there are so many opportunities to discover new things when we do that. So obviously the most obvious thing is I've put focus on the things you have in common, not the things that make your subjects different, because you could be in a pair with someone who's from a very, very different subject to your own. But I think if we approach it with a well, that doesn't matter, and even if what you're working on doesn't match up, then try and take other things from when you meet, because we are all teachers first and then teachers of our subject. That's how I think we are. So homework was the first one I thought. I don't know why, there's not an order to these, I just put things down, about, what can we learn about different types of homework. In obviously my subject, the homework's often something where they're practicing something they've learnt in class, and then we sometimes every now and then try and do a completely different type of homework where it's a new topic and what do they already know about it, or we try and present it in a different way. But you go to other subjects and you see some really inventive ideas with homework, and I think, my maths worksheet here is looking a bit boring. So sort of trying to pick up the different types of homework and how they then respond. Is there a type of homework that someone else does that they get a really good response to? So could you then adapt that to your curriculum area? Marking, because obviously that followed on, is there something that your partner does that could make your marking easier, help you save time? Do they have a really good idea that they use in their books, which then leads on to the red pen time? How do people tackle red pen time? I know there's been a lot of 15-minute forums on red pen time. I know that's a lot of people's objectives. So there's lots of ideas that people can share there. And then said, obviously behaviours improves sort of substantially in the school, but what strategies do people do? So if you go and observe someone, if they're all sat really engaged and really working, you might not pick up on that. But if you then go in and there's not those things, or how are they dealing with low-level disruption? How do they deal with missing equipment, that sort of thing, and how do they make sure that that doesn't really impact on the learning? What AFL strategies do they use? That's one of the ones I've found the most when I've been to observe, is seeing different people and the different AFL, and it gets immediate feedback. But what do they then do with it? Because some people, sometimes the temptation with AFL, isn't it? Well, I've done some, and so I can tick that off. But actually, if you don't do anything with it after you've done some AFL, it's not particularly worthwhile. The next two, I thought, probably aren't things that you'd particularly necessarily think about, because obviously formal assessment, well, we've all got our set ways within our department, and unless you're the head of department, you probably have a limited amount of input into this. But especially in Key Stage 3 with no levels, how are people using flight paths? I watched Rachel, just because I was chatting to her about something else, I watched Rachel marking some citizenship work, I think it was. I don't think it was health and social. It might have been, but it might have been citizenship. And I watched her sort of how she was marking, and then I was telling her how we've been doing it in maths with the flight paths, and she was saying, well, surely it's easy in maths, and I thought, well, it's all of it, but we've had to write all these things for all the different, we were just discussing the different sort of ways that we're flight pathing, which has nothing to do with Nitro, but it was really quite good. We had quite a discussion about that. And then pupil premium, obviously, again, everyone's got that involved in their performance management. What strategies does your person use, even if it's not something you're focusing on in your group, but what are they doing about pupil premium students? Are they doing anything in particular? Have they got any ideas that you could share? So I just thought I'd come up with some ideas, maybe to say that, cross-curricular, it's not about planning something to do together, but you could, if you've got time and you meet, discuss some of these when you observe them, try and pick up some of these things, even if they're not directly related to what you actually doing in your coaching training. So, can anyone think of anything obvious
No, it's
I've
really
missed?
useful because I haven't done a great deal at the moment. So this gives me some ideas to look for and discuss with my team member.
Because as I was doing it, I could think of more and more things. Well, everyone does this, everyone does this. Obviously there are some things that don't work across the different subject areas, and it is hard to, make them work in two different subjects. But there are lots of things that, it just gives you different ideas sometimes that you could then adapt, and you can think, oh yeah, maybe that would work. Is there anything else?
That's good, thank you very much. Thank you, three of you. We usually
That shows I've not been.